I now call on Howard Gill, who's the chair of the Queensland Heritage Council Policy Committee, to try and draw some of the threads together from today's session, and then I'll come back with just final remarks and close. So thank you, Howard.
Thanks very much. I think I should make if I could make the opening point that the Heritage Council, of which I've not been on for very long, the Queensland Heritage Council is a strange entity. It's a mixture of expertise, that is people with architecture, planning, conservation expertise, plus a set of people from specified sectors in the Act. So it's a combination of the two, and it's charged with conservation, not with preservation. And I need to say I'm actually the Queensland Council of Trade Unions nominee on the Heritage Council, and what I'm saying now does not commit the Queensland Council of Unions to anything. And also because we have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the sort of outcomes of this forum, I'm actually, a lot of my comments have not been endorsed necessarily by the Heritage Council or the Policy Committee, of which I'm at the moment the chair, which also enables me to be a little bit more, I think, perhaps I want to be a little bit controversial, but I don't at all want to be tendacious. I think there were important uses just to start. The other thing I thought it's come through, I just want to reinforce the second presentation. What we are about, why we are here and why this is an issue is because of the issue of climate change. I mean, this has brought these matters to a head. And I just note two different responses to climate change, not the obvious ones, I'm not scoring points. I mean, from the economists, the Stern from Great Britain, Gard'ner from Australia, they basically see it as a problem of externalities. As Ross Gard'ner says, climate change is a wicked problem. It raises a whole set of new distributional and equity issues that we need to deal with. But in his view, and Stern's view, they can be dealt with adequately through market arrangements, essentially through some form of carbon price. And certainly there will be a carbon price because there's already a carbon price. There's carbon prices in the renewable energy sector. There's carbon prices already in the economy. There is another view, however, which is the view of the former CSIRO leader, Clive Spash, who is now a professor, I think, in Norway, whose argument is that the market response is limited, that we need actually a strong regulatory response to climate change. And I think personally think we will see both, and we need to be adjusting to both. The building in of the price and regulation. And to just note on both, the level of regulation in Australia now is lower than most other OECD countries. The effective carbon price in Australia is 8 times lower than it is in China, according to the latest information that I read to put these together. So we're going to be big movements in both areas, the carbon pricing and its effects and the regulatory changes. We're starting to see those in, as was discussed, the Building Efficiency Disclosure Bill. The other point I would make, and this is a very personal point, my view is that the target of 450 parts per million is inadequate, and that we need to be thinking seriously of a target of 350 parts per million. And that again has got there's a lot of solid support for that across the world. The International Confederation of Trade Unions has that view, for example, and that means faster responses, means faster responses and more drastic responses. So they're the context of why we're here. A set of the issues that are facing us have been set out, I think, by David very effectively in terms of commercial buildings, we are facing a whole set of market pressures as owners and developers react and foresee the sorts of pressures that are coming. They're going to extend very quickly. The building efficiency disclosure, I understand, phase 2 is to come ahead with the schools, universities, and retail premises quite quickly. So we're going to see those things come forward very quickly into the full range of buildings. And also, one should say, is that they apply equally to the public and the private sector. There is no distinction between the two. So we're faced with many things. My sense of where we're going and my sense of how it should be approached by the Heritage Council and indeed perhaps by the community wider is summarised by, and I have to say, a friend of mine who is the National President of the Coal Miners Union, of all people. Tony Marr has basically said, yes, climate change is happening, it is just another restructure. Just another restructure on a bigger scale. And so what we're dealing with is new in terms of climate change, but in terms of the responses, not that new. And I want to suggest that the Council, the Heritage Council response, and the general response can be broken down under perhaps 4 headings. The first is just the one of ideas and innovation. We need to learn how to use and reuse heritage places. We've seen a couple of examples today, more than a couple of examples. My only issue about that, and this is where I said I'd be a little bit, not querulous, but raise a hard question. In my view, it is easy to readapt the Perth General Post Office. What are you going to do with the Rockhampton General Post Office? What are you going to do with retail buildings and commercial buildings in the declining regional cities? It's not that they can't be changed. Is there any effective reuse for them? There is a limit. I said this, I think I was first on the council. There is a limit to the number of museums we can have. There's a limit to the number of craft shops we can have. So what are we going to do with those is really quite important. But more generally, in terms of ideas and innovations, architects, planners, developers have already adopted to a set of other things. I mean, you've adopted well to the new occupational health and safety requirements. I remember speaking about 15 years ago for the Labour Council to professional body of architects saying that we expected them to take responsibilities for the accidents that occurred in the buildings that they would be designing. They didn't like it, but they've done it and done it well. So you've adapted to those things in the same way adapting to heritage is not really different. So we need to adapt, we need new models, we need new guides, we need innovative solutions. I think those solutions have got to be holistic. They're not just heritage, they're heritage, health and safety, access, etc. I think second, and the point was made, I think, by Adam, in terms of precincts of the valley. Some of you will know, certainly in this room, that the Heritage Council took on the Brisbane City Council about its plans for the valley, for its 30 or 40-storey buildings that it wanted in the valley, and has had a degree of success in getting that altered. But in doing so, how do we now use those buildings to bring them up to the need for sustainability? It's a big issue. We need to deal with it on a precinct basis. And those innovative models need to be carefully examined, because it is easy to try and snow people like me on the Heritage Council. I'm not a designer, I'm not a builder. And we saw last year on the Heritage Council the sad saga of the Blind Institute, knocked down to provide for a research laboratory supported by the University of Queensland, Queensland University of Technology and the Department of Health, simply because the architect was carefully briefed not to be asked to include that building in the new precinct, but asked to look after a record of the history of that building. And for those people who ask that the Heritage Council show discretion, and which I agree with, and I'll come to, we also expect that there is early dialogue about setting the objectives for those kinds of buildings. But ideas and innovations are important. Second is the issue of markets and money. We need to ensure that heritage buildings get their fair share of the Green Building Fund as it comes along. We need to ensure that heritage buildings are properly involved in state government and local government initiatives about sustainability. And we need to look very carefully about how we handle this issue of embedded energy. I mean, I was an economist by training. Embedded energy doesn't have a marginal revenue in a cash economy or in a market economy. What we actually need, for those who, I believe, and just to give you an outlandish statement, what we actually need is a RED scheme. Those of you who've looked at climate change, and I've been involved in this in Papua New Guinea, there is the RED scheme, which is where you can get money for agreeing not to knock down forests. So you're actually getting a carbon credit for something. And we seriously need to think through how we monetize the carbon, the embedded energy in heritage buildings, so that there is a carbon credit for it. And I think it was, as Lynn said, until and unless it factors into the carbon price, it won't be looked at. So one of the critical things is, how do you include the embedded energy as a carbon credit? Now, to do that, we need people at the table negotiating that. So one of the things I'm going to come to in a moment is, how do you support the Heritage Council? How does the Heritage Council support you in getting at the table discussing those kinds of things? So we need, the markets and money are all important. Regulation, we have the issues of, I sort of raised, are we being too precious? I think that was adequately raised in the last question. The